My son emptied my bank account and sailed north with his wife and her mother. Alaska, he wrote, as if the word could wash his sins clean. They posted photos in white robes, champagne glasses high, smiling like billboards selling a better life. I didn't scream. I made tea. Because when you've driven Detroit buses for 30 years, you learn. Power isn't noise, it's control. At 5:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Available balance, $0.00. No commas, no mercy. I tilted the screen, thinking the numbers might change if I gave them a better angle. They didn't. And right there, I realized something my son never did. You can lose every dollar you own and still not be broke. Because some debts are paid with your days, and I still had mine. So I opened my cedar box, the one that keeps the proof of who I used to be, route slips, photographs that forgot their corners, the stub of the last overtime check I saved instead of spent. I call it the ledger, but it's not about arithmetic. It's about the kind of debt you pay with your days. I breathed in the smell of cedar and old soap and thought, I am not broke. Only the numbers are. Doris from next door yelled like always, like we still lived in a time when women called across fences instead of screens. Ruth, you up? She didn't wait for an answer. She never does. Baby, you seen Facebook? Lord have mercy, your Marcus on a ship big as a courthouse. That girl and her mama got him posed up like he's a senator. Champagne at breakfast? What kind of stomach they got?
I didn't answer. Tea won't pour itself and gossip won't fix a balance. When I did look, I didn't go to Facebook. I went to Instagram because that's where they live their pretend. They had boarded in Seattle. The glass behind them showed gray water like sheet metal and mountains that cut the sky. Inside passage, the caption said, my new beginning. I pressed my thumb to his face on the screen, the way a mother does without thinking, as if she can touch the boy through the picture. He was smiling at the camera, not at anybody in particular. Sierra's lipstick matched her robe tie. Deirdre shelled her glass like she wanted it to know she was in charge. I scrolled and found dinner plates, a spa tub, a balcony with railings so clean they didn't look like they had ever kept anyone from falling. I put the phone down. I sipped. The tea was too hot. I drank it anyway. You want to know what power is? People think it's volume. Slam a door, break a plate, make a scene. I drove city buses for 30 years. Try stopping 30 tons without sending a standing teenager into a pole when a Buick cuts you off on ice. That's power. It takes wrists, ankles, breath. It takes quiet where the world expects noise. I didn't call my son. I didn't call the bank. I opened the drawer where I keep my envelopes and wrote the date in the right-hand corner the way I always do when something begins. Then I wrote his name under it. Not because I planned to send him anything, because I wanted the record to see him. Harold answered his door in his robe like he always does. He used to do compliance at the credit union until they decided nobody needed a person in that chair anymore. Then they bumped him out and told him to enjoy his garden. He wears slippers that scuff like they go to work anyway. His living room smells like time and paper. He poured me coffee I shouldn't have and took the cedar box like it was an infant. He talks slow on purpose. He believes words are heavy and mean to be carried. Wires are rivers. They don't like to run backward. I don't need a river to turn around. I need a dam. He smiled down into his cup like the coffee had said something he'd been waiting to hear. We'll call Avery. She's got the hands for screens. I've still got names that pick up when I call. He paused. Ruth, I'm going to say a few things you already know and a few you won't want to know. You're ready? I have been ready longer than anybody gave me credit for. We sat at his table with his lamp pulled low. My phone sat face up like it was going to apologize. Avery came in 10 minutes later wearing a hoodie with cats playing with Ethernet cords. She knows the library like some people know church calendars. She pulled her laptop and scooted the salt and pepper out of the way like she was clearing space at an altar. "Okay, Miss Miles." She only calls me Ruth when we're not working. "What do you remember? Every click, every text, every yes you meant to be a no." I told them everything I could make myself say without running out of words. The time he said he'd make bill paying easier if I gave him the password. The time I signed a card reader without my glasses because the line behind me was impatient and the cashier friendly. The time I said okay to an email that looked like the credit union but wasn't. The times I overtrusted what sounded like love.
Avery made a little timeline on her screen, boxes like steps, each step with a number that used to belong to me. She pulled up the bank portal and clicked into the part where they hide the technical. She showed me IP addresses with tiny letters and numbers the size of the dots in an I. She put that in a little column. That's their apartment Wi-Fi. This one shows public, coffee shop on Cass. These two are your house. She sipped water and changed windows so fast the computer looked like it was breathing. "Here," she said, and her voice changed shape. "Look at this." It was a power of attorney form. It had my name at the top and my son's in a line that looked like it had been filled with pride. It said medical reasons. It said durable. It said the kind of legal that tries to scare you into not asking questions. At the bottom, my signature tried and failed to be my signature. I closed my eyes. I didn't see anything special. I saw blank. I didn't speak until I could do it without a tremor. "I didn't give him my breath," I said. "If I did, I would have watched him hold it." Harold took off his glasses and set them down the way men set down hats in church. "This will not stand," he said. He used his office voice, the one that still sits tall even after retirement. "It doesn't check out. Wrong notary sequence, wrong witness lines. We can file elder abuse. We can file fraud. The credit union will listen to me if the paperwork is steady and the story is quiet. We won't throw the book at him. We will open it." Avery took screenshots like a crazy quilt. She pasted dates and tiny numbers and made every line line up. She's going to show you something, not to give you hope, just to show you what lines touch. The cruise company uses a wristband and an app, is connected to a card. Your account is tagged. If the hold posts before they hit a certain threshold, it won't stop the ship, but it can stop the spending. She looked up at me. "You understand? I've driven in snow. I know the feeling right before a skid. It's a hush." We filed reports. We filled blank spaces with words that carried weight. We used my name like a fence, not like a gift. I did not tell a soul who would clap. I did not write a sentence I hadn't earned. I went home, put an index card into the cedar box, and wrote in my neatest hand, "I will not steal from Ruth Ann Miles." If the world was going to be dishonest with me, I was still going to be honest with myself. Marcus wasn't always this. He was a boy who smelled like pencil shavings and syrup. He slept with his ribs pressed to my back like a secret. He was 5 when he asked me if buses sleep. I told him yes, but they keep their eyes open in case a city needs them in the middle of the night. At 10, he cried because a glove fell between the seats and I couldn't stop to get it. At 12, he made me a paper medal with a ribbon drawn in marker and said I was the bravest person on the route. At 15, he stopped looking at me like I could fix everything and started looking at the world like it owed him something. We survived it the way mothers and sons do. He moved out. He moved back. He called. He didn't. He brought Sierra over with nails so perfect they looked like they were grown by a machine. She called me Ruth, like we were equals.
Her mother, Deirdre, came once and looked at my living room like it could use a lecture. She said charming, the way a realtor says it when she wants you to know it's small.
It's a strange thing to be called poor by someone who confuses gloss for grace. I know how to make $10 feed 2 people 3 times without the plate looking sad. I know how to mend a scarf and make the stitched part the prettiest part. I know what a boundary sounds like. I learned it late, but I learned it. The freeze posted on a Wednesday. Harold called and told me in the same tone he used when his rhubarb finally showed up in the spring. "Review period initiated," he said. "Spending flagged, pending verification." Playing words for a complicated machine. It meant the river noticed the dam. On the ship, it meant dinner would be an education. I didn't see it. I'm not a ghost. But I can tell you what it felt like in my bones miles away. A first decline that still smiles, a second decline that looks around for a manager, a third decline that invites an audience. Men get loud when they are scared because they think loud is what makes a man. My boy isn't built like that. He gets small. He apologizes to the wrong people. He tries to fix what he doesn't know how to name. Sierra shrugs like the camera is still on. Deirdre narrows her eyes to a sliver and asks where his usefulness is. Somewhere between the restaurant and the cabin, he calls me. He hangs up. He calls again. Grown men can sound 5 when the floor tilts. "Mom?" he says when I answer. Just that, like the word can hold the rest. "My card, the room, they say there's a hold. Did you—" He stops himself because he knows better than to accuse me of saving myself. "I filed a report," I tell him, "because a paper said I gave them you and you gave them me, and we didn't." "What am I supposed to do?" His voice shakes. It hurts me in a place I keep locked. "You are supposed to learn," I say. "That is what you are supposed to do. You can start by not stealing from your mother, even if someone taught you to call it something else." He cries a little and tries to hide it. I let him try. Not every tear needs a witness. When he can breathe again, he whispers that he's sorry. I tell him not to spend it. "Don't use it like a coupon," I say. "Don't lay it on the counter to get a discount on decency. Say it one time when you mean it, and then don't say it again. Do work instead." They limp through the rest of their cruise like people who thought water was a stage. I make a peanut butter sandwich and eat it on the porch, with Doris telling me that she knew that woman would trip on her own shoes one day. I think about buying a ticket to Seattle and decide against it, because I don't need spectacles. I need signatures. But then Pastor Tina stops me after the pantry session on Tuesday and says something that shifts the ground under my feet. "God doesn't need you to watch," she says, "but sometimes the child needs to know the mother saw him when he finally turned around." I don't argue with a woman who has kept secrets for a whole block. I go home and look at the price of a flight. It's more than I want it to be and less than my dignity. I buy the ticket. Seattle is a different kind of gray. The air tastes like coffee and cranes. The mountains stand around like strangers who might be friends if you say hello first. I sit in the concourse and watch people carry their lives in rolling boxes. I hold my purse in my lap and the cedar box in my carry-on, and I think about how many mornings turn out to be beginnings when they pretend to be middles. I breathe. I thank the muscles in my shoulders for all the holding they do. I ask my knees to behave. I land the day before the ship does because Harold told me there are forms at the other end, and I want to understand them with my eyes, not through a phone. He texted me the address where I need to go and wrote, "Don't be impressed by the seal on the wall. They hang 'em up to make you small. You already did the hard part." They make him sit in a room with chairs that stack and a clock that pretends time hasn't learned to sprint. They say his name into a quiet that isn't friendly. He looks like the boy who forgot his science project at home, except he's in a grown man's body and the consequence is not a grade. Ciara peels off because mirrors need feeding. Deirdre vanishes into a crowd because some people believe leaving is a skill. I walk in with my purse on my elbow and my shoes that make sense. A woman in a navy blazer asks if I am comfortable, and I tell her I have sat in seats that were meant to bruise. I can sit through this. Paper has a way of building a mountain out of nothing. The words flow one into another, each one steady, each one a step. Provisional, complaint, review, restitution. My name, his name. A line that used to be blurred is now an ink fence. They ask him questions the way doctors ask patients who can't make eye contact. They ask me if I consent to what I already started. I answer like a person who has learned what yes means. Not a weapon, a direction. When the woman leaves us alone for a minute, I stand. I let my breath come before my words. I've learned there is a beat that makes sentences honest. He looks at the floor, not because he's stubborn, but because lifting his head will hurt. I talk to the top of his head anyway because I used to kiss prayers there, and some of them might still be sitting. I say his name once, not because I think he'll forget it, but because I want him to hear it from me. Marcus. That's all. I tell him I will not carry his shame. He can lift it or leave it, but I will not. I tell him I am taking my name back, the one that goes on forms, the one that goes on invitations, the one elders say when they press your hand and mean to bless you. I tell him I will not call him a thief in public, but I will call this what it is inside my own house. I tell him I loved him like rent that never came due, but I will not pay it twice. I tell him he is still my son because blood is stubborn and because I choose it. But the door to my bank is closed the same way the door to my room is closed after 10 p.m. Boundaries do not mean cruelty. They mean finally telling the truth about what hurts and how not to do it again.
He tries to speak and fails. I let the failure sit. I feel his chest shake in the body that is not touching mine. I remember the smell of pencil shavings and syrup, and I do not fall for it. I have learned that memory is sweet and sugar isn't dinner. The woman comes back with papers and a pen. He signs. His hand stutters on his last name. I sign where I sign. She passes me another page and explains how the money will find me again like a storm does, slow at first and then all at once. She tells him about conditions for a return. She uses words that aren't mean and still cut. Accountable is one of them. He nods like a man who finally believes in gravity. Outside, Seattle doesn't care about our little tragedy. That is how cities keep going. A gull yells at a kid with a pretzel. A truck groans. The water acts like it owns the sky. He asks if he can hug me at the curb, like the curb is a border. I tell him he can pay what he owes. He looks like he might break. Not like glass, like soil when it finally takes water. He asks what that looks like, and I tell him the truth. Restitution. A plan that hurts a little every week for a long time. Union fund. Pantry shifts. Driving elders and groceries without the meter on. He can come to Pastor Tina at 5 and ask for the list. He cannot come to my house without calling first for a year. He cannot use an apology like a key. He cannot put his wife or her mother in his mouth to explain himself. He nods until nodding turns into a promise. On the plane home, I sit by the window and look down at mountains that don't know me. I think about the first time Marcus brought Ciara to my house, how she called my couch vintage, like that made it better and worse at the same time. I think about the way Deirdre looked at my hands when I poured tea, like I used them to do small things and she used hers for grand ones. I think about the time I bought Marcus a suit from the thrift store and pressed it so carefully you would have thought it was born on that hanger. He wore it to his first job in an office that smelled like toner and told me he felt like a man. Somewhere between that suit and that ship, he forgot what makes a man. I'm not going to remind him with a speech. I'm going to remind myself with a door that closes. Money starts to come back like a map retracing itself, not fast enough to celebrate, but steady enough to sleep. Harold sits at his table with a calculator the size of a book and hums as he taps, not because he needs to, but because he likes the music numbers make when they obey. Avery prints a stack for me and puts it in a folder. She writes my name on the tab where I can see it without squinting. She asks me if I want help setting up new passwords, and I say, yes. I pick words that belong to my grandmother and my first address and the middle name nobody uses. I write them in ink in a place that is not visible to anyone who doesn't know how I fold things. I put the index card back in the cedar box and write a second line under the first. I will not steal from Ruth Ann Miles. No one else will either.
Marcus doesn't come by my house. He does what I told him. He shows up at the church and moves boxes of canned peaches and beans from one room to another until he sweats through the shirt he wore on that ship. He signs the restitution plan without asking for a softer math. He gets a job, delivering parts for a mechanic who knows what second chances look like. He keeps his head down because it has finally become heavy in a useful way. Sierra sends him a message that says, "I didn't sign up for this," and he doesn't reply. Deirdre puts a picture of a bouquet on her page with a caption about blooming where you're planted. I don't call her anything at all. I see him sometimes from the bus window of the route I still ride out of habit. He carries cardboard to the recycling bin behind the pantry. He holds a door for a woman with a stroller. He stands on a sidewalk in rain without rushing because he has learned that you can't hurry a penance. He doesn't look at my porch. He knows better. He sends a check every other Friday, and it is not enough, and it is exactly what we agreed. I deposit it and do not post about it. I cook for myself. I share what I make with Doris if she asks. I keep my house as clean as a place where a person is trying. I breathe in my kitchen and remember that warmth is not the same as heat. One afternoon in August, I come home to a box on my stoop. Not a package, a planter. Cedar. Small, square, patient. There's a sapling in it with a little tag that says, "Western Red Cedar. Water generously first year. Give it something to lean on." There is no note. I don't need a note to know who said it there. I do the math women do when they notice something done with thought. The planter didn't buy itself. The hands that sanded the corners learned to be careful from someone. Maybe from me. I take it to the patch of earth by the back steps that fails everything I put in it, and I decide this is where we will try. I dig. The dirt is stubborn, and rocks speak up when they want to be left alone. I put the sapling in and whisper a promise I didn't know I was going to make until I made it. I will not rush your roots. You can take as long as you need. The house lien that made me nervous at the beginning turned out to be noise. A bold contractor's invoice that thought my age meant I didn't read numbers. I do. Harold calls a man he knows, who calls a woman who sends a letter that makes the liar leave me alone. Still, it made a different clock start in my head. It reminded me that our borders need tending when we get tired. I go down to the Union Hall and shake hands with a new young woman who didn't know me when I drove. She smiles like she means it and says if I ever want to tell stories to new hires about what work is, she'll give me 10 minutes at orientation. 10 minutes to say that a city is not a collection of status updates, but a series of stops that only make sense if you respect the people who step on and step off. 10 minutes to say that you do not have to become what betrayed you. People in the neighborhood find out what happened the way neighborhoods learn things. Some of them want the version with a hero and a villain and a climax that ends in a shout. I don't give them to them. I tell them we filed a report. We froze a line. We met at a door. We wrote our names in the right places. We will keep writing them. I tell them it is possible to bring money home without burning a life down. I tell them how a boundary can be a kindness to both sides. Someone asks if I forgave him, and I say I forgave him for being a human who made terrible choices because he learned that want is a kitchen and not a fire escape. I did not forgive the choices. They don't need my blessing. They need to stop.
Time moves forward even when you want it to look back at you one more time. Winter puts its shoulder to the door before Thanksgiving now. I put plastic on the windows the way I always do. I hang my coat by the door with the sleeve straight so it feels like someone is waiting inside it. The cedar in the planter leans the way the little tag said it might. I give it a stick to lean against and tie it with a strip of cloth from one of Marcus's old t-shirts. I stand there in my yard with my hands on my hips like I just moved a couch and think about the way things hold each other up when you let them. I go inside and pull the cedar box from the shelf. I take out the index card and look at the 2 lines. Then I add a third. If I am loved, I will know it by the work it does. He knocks on my door a year from the day the ship sailed. I know it's him because some sounds belong to specific people and because I keep a calendar in my head that doesn't forget anniversaries no matter how hard I try to ignore them. I don't answer at first. I let him knock again. I open the door without the chain because I am done being the kind of afraid that makes you smaller. He stands there with his hands at his sides. No flowers, no basket, no ceremony. He looks like a man on his way to being human. He says he paid the last of it. He says he finished the pantry run schedule and he can keep doing it if they need him. He says he works mornings at the parts place and nights 2 times a week at the church van. He says he is learning how to sit with a thing instead of escaping it. I tell him to come in. I tell him to leave his shoes by the mat because it has been raining for 2 days. He laughs a little at the way that sounds, like it did when he was 10, and I feel something loosen in my chest. But I keep it. We sit at the table with the 2 cups that match. He keeps his eyes on the wood grain like it contains answers. I ask him if he is well. He says he is better than he was. He asks if the cedar is mine in the yard, and I say it is ours if he wants to water it when I forget. He nods. He asks if I will come to the pantry on Saturday and let him carry the heavier boxes. I tell him I will not lift what I don't need to, but I will still carry what is mine to carry. He doesn't bring up Sierra and I don't ask. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for a person is to let their silence stay dressed. He asks if we can take a short drive, and I almost say no out of habit, then remember my stubbornness is not a virtue. We get in his car, which smells like oil and peppermint, and we go nowhere in particular. He keeps to the speed limit. At a light, he says something so small I almost miss it. He says he thought money would fill a hole he didn't know how to describe. He says he now knows what fills holes is soil and what grows is slow. I put my hand on the dash like I'm steadying myself and say he can stop trying to name what is not asking to be named. He can just put his hands on good work and do it. He nods and turns onto a street I know blind, and I think maybe this is how a person comes home, not with a parade, with a turn. After he drops me off, I go inside and take down the cedar box again. I add a 4th line. I will not mistake peace for permission. Then I sit on the couch and watch the light move across the floor, and I let the city be loud without me. Later, when Pastor Tina calls, I pick up and tell her the simple version.
She hums like she does when a hymn sneaks into her throat without an invitation. She says, "Next time I see you, remind me to tell you about my Aaron, and the day he learned $1 will leave you faster than a boundary will." I tell her I will, and then I put my phone down on the table and I don't carry it until it calls me for something I actually need. On the anniversary of the freeze, Harold brings me rhubarb pie, and Avery brings me a printout of passwords in a sealed envelope that looks like a magic trick. They sit at my table and eat like people who know the work was worth the effort. We talk about everything except the thing. When we finish, Avery looks at the cedar in the yard and asks if she can take a picture. She says she thinks better when she can see growth. I tell her yes, but no filters. She laughs and says, "I know better than to make a cedar look like something it isn't." Before they leave, Harold squeezes my shoulder and says, "You did exactly what needed doing. You didn't drift into a story you didn't write. You wrote it." I squeeze his hand back and tell him plain, it was our pen. One day in late spring, a teenager on the bus stumbles when the driver brakes too hard. The driver apologizes over the speaker in a voice full of newness. The kid shrugs and holds on. I smile because I know the math of stopping too fast, and I know the mercy of a passenger who forgives the physics of it. I get off 3 stops early on purpose and walk because the sky is doing that blue that makes even broken glass look like decoration. A man on a porch nods and says good morning like it's a habit he enjoys. I stop at the corner and listen for a bird I can't see, and I think about routes and how they are only useful if they are honest. Months stretch the way they do when you hang laundry and the wind helps. Marcus keeps his schedules. He keeps his checks coming. He keeps his distance and his respect. On a Sunday when I return from church, there are fresh lines in the dirt under the cedar where he has loosened the soil so water can do its job. He didn't leave a note. He didn't need to. I tie another strip of cloth to the stick because the tree is taller now, and sometimes taller things need help too. I stand there with dirt under my nails and laugh to myself because this looks nothing like a fairy tale and everything like a life.
And then one morning, standing at my sink, I realize I am humming. Not the old sad hum, but a practical tune I used to hum when Marcus was little and I was late, and we were still going to get out the door in time because a bus will not wait for any woman or her excuses. I think about how many stops we've made since zeros showed up on a screen and tried to tell me who I was. I am not a number. I am a woman who can make a root from a mess. I dry the cup. I set it upside down to catch its breath. I touch the cedar box with 2 fingers. I say out loud, which I don't do often, next stop, home. Home is not a prize. It isn't a finish line. It is a table where cups have rims that fit your lips and a chair that knows your knees. It is a yard that holds a tree that will outlive you. It is a son who is learning to be a man without making you the bill. It is a city that keeps running, with or without your story, but pays attention when you show up and take your seat early and hold the pole when the road gets rough. It is a boundary that feels like a door shutting and then a window opening because air is still allowed. It is a ledger that counts nothing you can hold and everything you would miss if it disappeared. Sometimes, late at night, I take the card out and read those lines again. I will not steal from Ruth Ann Miles. No one else will either. If I'm loved, I will know it by the work it does. I do not add a 5th line, not because I cannot think of one, because 4 is a good number. It fits in the hand. It fits in a life. I put the card away and slide the cedar lid back into place. I turn off the kitchen light and stand there a second because darkness is honest. It tells you if you are afraid or if you are resting. I decide I am resting. I go to bed and sleep like a person who earned it. I dream of water that minds its business. I dream of a bus that breaks smooth at every stop. I dream of a little boy smelling like pencil shavings and syrup, asleep on my shoulder, my hand on his back counting breaths. In the dream, I whisper what I forgot to say out loud when it might have mattered sooner. You are loved. But love is not a bank. You can't make withdrawals without deposits. In the dream, he nods like he understands. Maybe he does. Maybe he will. Morning will come whether or not he does. I will make tea. I will read the weather. I will feed the cedar. I will take my seat behind the day and keep my hands gentle and my eyes on the road. The city will ask me, without words, where to next? And I will answer the way I always have when I know the right thing. Home.